You might be turning to 1 Corinthians chapter 16. We're still there in those first 4 verses, because that was the plan. I really wanted to take time and examine carefully those first 4 verses, but just in view of the fact that there are division among even brethren on these passages and what they mean. We have some during the year of COVID that had actually stopped taking up collections because they weren't meeting. And then there's just a lot to say about this passage. There's a good bit of misunderstandings, like for instance, some contend that the money is to be kept at the house. And we've looked at that carefully. We know better, because Paul, that's exactly what he did not want. If you read those carefully, that he didn't want to have to take up collections, plural, that there be no collections, he said. So a lot of these things can be addressed if we take our time, go through the passages, and that's what we chose to do, is to break this up into sections. I really think it helps understand what's under consideration. If you just take this passage and it's just sitting here and you go read it, what you would come away with is that the churches of Galatia and the Corinthians only gave a collection. See, we know better. We've looked at the verses. There were many other churches. See, not only Corinth, which is in Achaia, but when Paul wrote to the church at Rome, see, those of Achaia, the churches of Achaia, contributed to this, not just Corinth. See? And then you go and read in other places, oh, the Macedonians were involved in this contribution. See? Other passages shed light on this. See? And then you'd come away with the church at Corinth took up a collection. You think that's all. No, there'd been collections since the beginning of the church. See? So when Paul says, now concerning the collection for the saints, he wasn't suggesting in any way that, here's a new collection I want y'all to start taking up. Here's as if the collection had never been taken up. There were no collections. And the very book we're reading in, he shows clearly, see, that preachers were to be supported. This church, he said, owed him. Now, he didn't take money from them, but he certainly showed that they owed him. They were indebted to him. He had shared spiritual things with them, and he raised the question, is it a great thing that I would see take from you your material things? We've shared in you. We've helped you. We've preached the gospel to you. See? And then we find out that he had robbed other churches. And you think about that and you can see, so now if the church is involved, then see, that's a treasury. There's where you'd have authority for a treasury. See, when you see that Paul took funds from other churches. So it wasn't just Corinth. You see, you start as you go through and you see, so that's why we're breaking this down into sections. See, now concerning, we looked at that expression. See, the collection. Which collection? We raised that question, and we can see when you go through and you're looking at all the collections, you can see, you can sheds a little light on this collection. And then last week we showed, he says, now concerning the collection for the saints. And Christians only is what Paul intended. And you raised that question, and some have contended otherwise, but we've shown they could look and hunt, because we all have, to make sure we're right about this, that churches are only authorized out of its treasury to take care of needy saints. Christians only. And Paul plainly says, now concerning the collection for the saints. Well, now, it's possible you could go read, and he over here in another passage, section of the Bible, he might say, now, concerning the collection for the saints and the unbelievers at Jerusalem. But guess what? You won't find it. It's not there. Now, he talks about this collection at different places in the Bible, this same apostle. See, he would write to Rome and he discusses it. He writes a second letter to this group. He brings it up. And then he lets us know that others were involved too. And so that's why we've taken this approach, so we can see what's under consideration here, keep it in its context of collections, see, that we know churches did. No way to get money into a church's treasury without some collection, some form of a collection. See? And so when he says here now concerning the collection, is that the only one? See, is that the only source? Is that the only way? Is those the only people? Is it just Jerusalem saints only that can get funds? See? If you look at that verse and just take it out of its context, you'd come away with that kind of nonsense, really. But that's not the case at all. And that's why, again, we've chosen to break it down into sections. And last week we showed clearly that every time that collection is mentioned, for instance, in 2 Corinthians 8:4, the gift and the fellowship of the ministry to the saints, referring to this same collection. 2 Corinthians 8:14, that your abundance may supply their lack, the Christians' lack, and also that their abundance may supply your Christians, your lack. And then Paul says in verse 1 of chapter 9, now concerning the ministering to the saints. It's unnecessary, see, that I discuss you. Y'all are well equipped, been ready to do this. It's unnecessary. And so, saints, saints, saints. But then you think, I wonder what they did at the beginning of the church. I wonder really what the apostles did, the 12. What'd they do? Saints. We went back and looked at it carefully, looked at each passage. Chapter 2, see, it was the saint, those that believed had all things in common. See? Always saints, always believers. And we've tried to take time so we can, one, reacquaint ourselves, be reminded that the church has no authority to take funds out of its treasury and help those who are unbelievers, no matter how desperate a situation may be. Why? Because the wisdom of God has really addressed a good way all humans out of their own pocket can relieve the needy. That's what this church has done. That's what our elders have done. They've not touched a dime of the money we put in that we've entrusted to them. God has entrusted to them. They've not given 1 cent to an unbeliever. I wonder why. But you know what they have done? They've preached to us. They've taught us out of your pocket, and they've read to us passages like James 1, see, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this. You want to help a widow? Visit widows. You want to help an orphan? Visit orphans in their afflictions. And to keep oneself, see, unspotted from the world. That's what the elders here have taught. That's what they promoted, is that we, out of our pockets, help unbelievers. They've encouraged that. They've pushed that. They've taught that. They've got people to come through and teach that. And that's what the Bible teaches. So don't ever fall, no matter what age we live in, don't ever fall for those old tricks. Brother Hall brought that up last week, sympathy tricks. Emotional pleas, emotional arguments as it relates to churches, the funds we collect, taking some of that and relieving unbelievers out here in our community or in anywhere in the world. No authority. How do we know? We've looked. We've looked. We've hunted and we've searched, and if we'd have found it, I got confidence. I mentioned this last week. I know who'd be doing it. Is these folks right I'm looking at. If it could be done, you'd be doing it. I'm confident of that. I know that. Of all the people on the planet, because I've watched you help. I've watched you suffer with, bear with, share your goods with others. See, I've watched it. I know you in those ways, but no authority. No authority. And Paul says, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I've given orders. And we showed that last week, and then we'll pick up with this expression up on the first day of the week. Brother Rex, did you?
Yeah, I was just thinking, we always look to the exactness of the Scripture, the word, the very words, the very tension of the words. And as you mentioned here, the collection, not this collection, not a collection, but the collection. When you go to Acts 6, it says this word, not word, but this word. It's specific, exact. And here in 1 Corinthians 11, 16, it says the collection, a general collection, not this or a or this one, but the. I think that's really important.
I think what Rex is pointing out is why brethren misunderstand our position on this is they're not careful with the wording of the text. Because we've done it, hadn't we? We've gone over and showed people in James chapter 1. Everybody in here, I believe, has done this probably at some point, where, and we've taken them down and shown them that this is individual action. Just follow the pronouns. See? See? Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this. Talking about the church? Well, no, to keep oneself unspotted. See, the wording, the words matter. And that's what Paul points out in this very book, isn't it? If you consider yourself to be spiritual, if you consider yourself to be a prophet, let him acknowledge that the things that I write to you, these words I'm writing, they are the commandments of God. They're to be handled carefully. See, with reverence and respect. Remember Lot's wife, Jesus would say. Remember Lot's wife. The words matter. Don't look back mattered. The words matter. The nouns matter. See, remember Lot's wife, Jesus would say. When you think that thing, it don't, it's just, boy, when you might be emotional and leaving home or leaving a place, see, don't look back. Well, maybe he didn't really, he didn't really mean, really. Does it mean look back or don't, did he just mean don't turn, see, the words matter. Jesus said, remember Lot's wife. And we all need to remember Lot's wife when it comes to these passages. But that's the point, Rex. Our brethren, we've been divided on something that simple and easy. They're not careful with the Bible. We've screamed it. We've pointed it out to them. This is individual action. Galatians 6, they go over there. Oh, look right here, look right here. Well, let's try that. Let's look at Galatians 6, see, and see. That's individual action. See, do good unto all, especially those of the household of faith. The church, well, let's go look at the pronouns. See, and you go down through there and you can say, oh, that's individual all the way through. So yes, we maintain, right, that individuals out of their pockets can help unbelievers. We've never argued that. But now go down through there at Galatians 6 and find me a church. That's what we ask. See, go find me some church action in Galatians 6 and verse 10. See, or in that whole section there, go find me a church. See, brethren, if any man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such a one, considering thyself. See, just all the way down, bear ye one another's burdens. You see, church, you see, no, individual action all the way down through there. Let him who is taught the word, see, share, communicate with him who teaches in all good things. See, all the way down through that thing. Individual, individual, individual. But you get over here, let's see, did Paul say individual? Well, he said both. Now, concerning the collection for the saints, as I've given order to the churches, he gave commandments, edicts, an order to the churches. This wasn't something, as we pointed out, Corinth could change its mind on or decide, we're running a little short of funds. We're going to get into ER's money. We can't do this. You say, no. Paul says, now concerning the collection, as I've given orders, Corinth, so you must do also. He commanded them to give. He commanded them to take this collection up. But he told them specifically how to do it. He says, what I want you to do, and that's where we are now, right? As I've given order to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also on the first day of every week. Let each one of you, I want each Christian to lay something aside, you see. Now the orders was to the church. This is church action. And anybody disagree with that or see that differently? Because what's actually what this is purely church action. The individuals involved in it, like they are in other things, you know, like our congregational singing. It's not to be done solo, even though it's individual singing. And we have some responsibilities as individuals, see, to be sing with pure hearts and all. And we teach and admonish one another. It's the individuals involved in it, but it's church action, isn't it, when we sing? See? It's done as an individual. It's like breaking bread. You can't really break it at home by yourself. It's really to be done as a collective, isn't it? See? You can tell that he wanted, when the disciples came together to break bread, it's to be done as a church. Individuals are doing it. Individuals are to have some responsibilities, just like here. That's what you have. But these orders are for church, the church. See, as I've given order to the churches of Galatia, the church was to send a contribution. And Paul told them to pick out, if they wanted to, some messengers, and he'd send them over with it, with the funds. He tells Corinth, if I need to go, I'll go with them. They can go with me. But churches were to pick out some men they trusted, see, and they could travel with it, because Paul, as he mentioned in the second letter, he really wanted things above board. No problems with this contribution. I want people in the world to know, see, providing for honest things, he would say, not only in the sight of men, but in the sight of God. He wanted this thing, he wanted men to see everything's above board. Got trusted men handling these funds, witnesses, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word can be established. These funds would be securely taken and laid at the feet of the elders at Jerusalem, or the apostles, however many of them were still around or whatever at the time. But that was his orders. Anybody, any comments along those lines? These are church orders. He gave orders to the church. See, the church's treasury is involved. That this collection, these collections he talks about, and it would have been, see, when I set mine aside, there's mine, there's Reuben's, there's Byron's, see, just right here, there's Mike's, see, and there's a bunch of them, but they ought to go, the church of Galatia, the church at Corinth was to make this contribution. Well, how would you accomplish that with it at the house? See, how would that get done, see? You'd have collections, wouldn't you, see? But that's what he didn't want. It was to be taken, that it to be stored in a treasury when you put it all together. Earmarked funds. Because he was going to come pick that up, and he said, when he wrote the second letter, he said, you know, if I don't get out, what I'm going to do, I'm going to send Titus over there early to help y'all go ahead and get this up. And incidentally, that sheds a lot of light on what we're going to talk about today, this first day of the week. Do we have the right day? See, because when we read, and let's take a minute and do that, it'll shed a lot of light on this expression over here, when he writes the second letter in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, here, I want you to see what Paul says about this contribution. He writes to him and he says, and in this I give advice, he says. And see, some people, they take that verse and they say, well, it wasn't an order then, was it? Paul said it was just his advice. Really? You know, you better come up with something else when he said, in this I give advice, because you can read over here where he says, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have ordered, and you must do it also. But anyway, they play on this little word right here, but be that as it may, he says, and in this I give advice, verse 10 of 2 Corinthians 8, he says, it is to your advantage not only, now watch the language, this is important, it is to your advantage not only to be doing what you began and were desiring to do a year ago. All right, so what has happened? They ain't got this money up yet. That's what has happened. Now, he was confident they would get it up. He says all the way down through there, I know regarding the ministry of the saints, it's unnecessary, it's superfluous that I even bring this up to you guys, because y'all are ready. You were ready a year ago, he says. And I told the Macedonians such. And y'all were the ones, he said, that really motivated the churches to give. Your readiness, your eagerness. But right here, though, he says, but look at what he says. And this is why I maintain that this is earmarked funds for a particular purpose, that this authorizes churches to take up a collection and to send funds to help needy saints at another congregation, because it's something that they began. That little word right there tells me. Because see, I know they had been taking up collections. I know they need to be paying preachers, because Paul had worked 18 months there, and he said, y'all should have been paying me. I know there were collections, and I know he was robbing other churches. But here when he writes, though, see, his second letter, a year earlier, he had given these orders. A year later, they ain't got it up yet. It ain't all together yet. And he says in chapter 9, I'm going to send Titus. In chapter 9, he says, now therefore, verse 5, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren to go to you ahead of time and prepare your generous gift beforehand, which you had previously promised, that it may be ready as a matter of generosity and not as a grudging obligation. And that's where all them good principles, see, that when we talk about we give, don't act like it's going to hurt you to give and stuff. But the context really of it is Paul is telling them, look, I'm going to go ahead and send Titus over there to get this up beforehand, see. And but the language here to me, see, when he says in verse 9 over here, what we just read, verse 10, it is to your advantage not only to be doing what you began and were desiring to do a year ago. See the language? See the wording matters? That is something they started. But I think we can prove it ain't like this was, when he said start, he didn't mean it's the first collection Corinth ever got up. See, doesn't this show the specific nature of this giving, since it was something that they began to do? Something that they were desiring to do a year ago? See, at some point they got this going. Well, when Paul sent these orders, they were to get this going. See, I've given some orders. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want each one of you to lay something aside and put this into the treasury. See, store this up. And well, one Sunday goes by. Now, see, about 52 Sundays done went by. They ain't got this money up yet. See, so picture what's happening here now about this collection. It ain't got up yet. It ain't prepared yet, and they ain't got it all in there yet. How do I know that? Because of this. Because he says in verse 6, now, but this I say, he who sows sparingly See, this is really the context of these verses we say all the time in our giving and different things. He who sows sparingly will reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give. Okay, a year later. Listen to what he's saying now. See this starting at some point? But look, they ain't got it up yet, but look what he's saying right here. A year later in this letter, he says now, so let each one give. See? Okay, see, it ain't got up yet. See, they was up on the first day of the week, giving into this collection. And the proper translations, I believe, is the idea up on the first day of every week. Let each one of you lay something aside. And a lot of the translations word it that way, and that's the proper wording of it. That the idea is each Sunday I want y'all to lay something aside, see. Put it in the treasury. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to get up y'all's gift. And then he writes a second letter and he says, I'm going to send Titus on over there to get this up. He tells why. Because he said, now if I come through here, see, and some of the brethren from Macedonia traveling with me, they'd look over here and say, I thought you said Corinth was on the ball. See, and he says, we don't want that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and send Titus over there to get this thing up because look at what he says. He says, now concerning the ministry of the saints, it's superfluous for me to write to you, for I know your willingness about which I boast to you. He done bragged about them. Said, Corinth been ready on this thing. He says, boast to you to the Macedonians. See, Macedonia got something up as a result of Corinth's willingness to give and eagerness to give and all. And then he says that Achaia, he says, was ready a year ago. And he says, and your zeal, and this is what I mean, has stirred up. See, Corinth's willingness to give. Paul, we ready. How can we help? How can we help? That stirred up the majority. And then he says, yet I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain. In this respect, he says, that as I said, you may be ready. You know, get it ready. Be ready when we come through. I told you, I don't want any collections, whatever. Get this money ready. And then he says, lest if some of the Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared. They all get into town. I say, where we at here? Where's where's y'all's gifts? And the elders are, what are you going to see here? You see, they've been paying bills. AR's covered. You know, boy, this is covered. They get in there and see the nature. See this giving shed a lot of light on this money here. See. Needed to get ready. They needed to get it in the pot. You see, it's a year later and it ain't up yet. See? And so it sheds a lot of light, doesn't it, on this particular contribution, this gift that they was going to send to help needy saints at another congregation at the Church of Jerusalem. We read earlier about the church at Antioch and its collection. They sent it to the churches in Judea. I think that's why I've maintained these are not the same, the Antioch giving isn't the same giving as this one right here, I don't believe. Just time-wise and otherwise about the contribution. When Agabus goes down in Acts 11, it tells of a famine. Here, we're not really told why these saints were in need, but we do know that it was dire, see, because think about us. If we were in such a shape that we had to get funds from the churches at, say, at Athens, what would that say about us? Things would be pretty bleak, wouldn't it? Just think about how hard people have worked around here their whole lives. Businesses, workings, retirements and everything, but we ain't got no money to take care of our people. Things would be bleak, wouldn't they? And you can see the need for others to help. And it sheds light on what Paul said in Romans chapter 15 about y'all really owe these brethren. They help teach you the gospel. They sent men out, and as a result of it, many of you are Christians now. And is it a great thing, see, that you would give them your material things, Paul would argue in Romans chapter 15. See, this sharing, this cooperation, other churches helping saints at other places. Situation would have to be pretty thin over there. Things was going good at one time at Corinth. They had a daily ministration going. See, they were sharing everything, going great. What's mine is yours. And see, it got to the point that all that had done, whatever, that had broken down to where they needed some help from other places, other churches. And I mean other churches. There's a bunch of them, really. When you look through, just look at like the churches of Galatia. See, that's Lystra, Derbe, Iconium. That's all them churches where Paul went through and got lit up. See, really got whooping, See, that's them churches. Well, look at Achaia. See, that's Corinth now. Then look at Macedonia. That's Philippi. That's the Thessalonians. That's all them brethren up in that area. See, a lot of churches involved in this. The churches of Macedonia. See, the churches of Achaia. Those in Achaia. See, helping out this contribution, this gift that was Paul and them was going to deliver to the saints at Jerusalem. Any questions or comments about this? Yes, sir.
Tie in with what you said, would, let's say, I know that over the years, we have, we sent men down the Walnut Road, we may have helped them in other ways, but the way I would see it, that even though you have a church here, let's say you have a small congregation somewhere, maybe, wherever it may be, that's not able to, support themselves, the preacher, the building, or whatever they've got going on. I mean, I wouldn't think that our obligation would ever end with them.
It doesn't. Now, this happened, and I think we need to keep this in mind. And Dave, this isn't necessarily something you're saying. What I want us to be clear on now is that this collection was for needy saints. Not this church can't pay its light bill, let's send them some money. No. I don't know where you could read, you ain't going to find it either. It's not churches helping churches, it's churches sending funds. Now, you might say, incidentally you're helping them. Well, if you won't play on the language, but what we can read is that this was for the needy saints in Jerusalem. See, and this money, like at Antioch, what Antioch did, and that's an approved example for us. I think really it's the same thing that went on here at Corinth as a church helping others at another church. And what did Antioch do? Each disciple determined, to send relief. And this they did, by the hands of Barnabas and Paul, this same apostle. And it says, and they took it, this collection, this fund, There's no evidence, that, because it said that Donnie wrote a check and said, look here, just make sure this is Donnie's. It's right here is ER's. And then here's some, hey, Jerusalem, here's some Byron Pleasure sent y'all some money. It wasn't that. Although, Byron's authorized to help needy saints if he wanted to out of his pocket. The point is what we're talking about here. Was disciples determined to send relief, but so did these. These disciples here determined to send relief. Read 2 Corinthians 8. See, the Macedonians wanted to help out. All these churches, those at Corinth wanted to help out too. But the point I'm making is they determined to send relief, and this they did. See, they sent it, it says, by the hands of Barnabas and Paul, and laid it, and that's what Dub was really pointing this out. See, and laid it at the feet of the elders. And I maintain that's elders because this is in Judea, not Jerusalem. Jerusalem would have had apostles. But this money, it says, was sent and laid at the feet. That's how the church is here in Judea. They laid it at the feet of the elders. That once that money gets to the church, it was given to the leaders, and then see they as dispersed and administered this relief, this aid. That is not, the church at Jerusalem, they about to get kicked out of their building. And so the church at Corinth said, well, look here, let's get up something to help the church over there. They need to pave their parking lot over there. Back then, maybe they need to plow their little area over there. Not that. They might have needed that, but that's not what's going on here at all. This was for the relief of needy saints. It's clear in all the passages where it's going, who's to do it, who has the oversight of it, and all those things. See? Any questions, wonderings, thoughts? Yes, sir.
Does that mean that Christians could not send collection or funds to other churches who did not have elders?
Can you and I send some money to the church at Legion Street out of our pocket? No? Out of the church's treasury. Oh, no, I don't think it matters whether there's elders or, I can't see any evidence that it would matter whether a church was scripturally organized or not. That I believe, Donnie, that this laying it at their feet is really putting it under the oversight of that congregation. That I think the elders is just indicative of who's going to administer the funds. See, and what I mean is the church here, we all were here when we ordained elders the first time, but what had we been doing prior to that? See, and did we have a treasury? And did we have an oversight? I think we did. See, I think the men decided how things were spent, and I think that's really scriptural from what I can read. That I don't think this idea of laying it at the feet of the apostles. Well, these churches in Judea didn't have apostles. Does that mean now, so you can read over here, here's a passage that says it's got to be laid at the feet of an apostle. And then you see elders, well, which is it? Which one is it? Whose feet it need to get at? Well, in the idea simply to lay it at the feet, to get it at the leadership's feet is what I would argue, but you might counteract that, Donnie. You may have a thought on that. Not at Walnut Grove. It was brother and sister Vickery out there, and then he passed on it, and then it got. I think they pretty much stopped then, but seemed like we started taking a few with a Sid. I know Dub. Me and you've been out. Dub's preached out. Different ones have preached out there. Most all of us have, and we start taking a person with us, and then it'd be 3, 4 of us out there. Just so we could kind of order the services and things like that. So your question, Donnie, is can the church here take funds out of its treasury and do what with it?
And give to a congregation comprised only of women. Who has the oversight of what the church is this week?
Yeah. And I would argue, and here's little things we've done, haven't we, Rex? Good question. I'm going to let Rex handle that. But, we kind of started handling their business. I don't mean the elders oversighting it. I don't mean that. What I mean is, Donnie, some of us that were going out there, to conduct the worship services, and taking up the funds, because we wanted to make sure they wasn't put in a situation to where even, a woman can teach a woman, but a woman ain't got if it's two women in there, she ain't no business standing in no pulpit in the name of a assembly talking to anybody, see. So even though they might have enough to make up a church, if it's 5 women, one still can't get up and preach. See, so we handling that part of it. See, so there's some little lines in there, but like Rick said, we started trying to help them out in little ways that wouldn't impede, see, up on there. We never did, hey, won't y'all buy you a bill? Hey, won't y'all, we didn't get into that. But I remember some of those little delicate situations, because I remember that's the first time I raised the question in my mind, can I break bread with them? I done broke it here. And then, see, I'm going out here, they'd meet at 3 where we could get back to our services. And then, see, the question is, can I break, that's when I was first kind of grappling with them kind of questions of, can I break bread with them when I go out there, see, with this church that I'm preaching to, a part of, and all that. Was that the second bell? The first one. Okay, any questions or anybody got any good thoughts on these or disagree? You see what, hope we've been clear on the yesterday.
Our obligation would not always, I don't think would always have to be tied up with money doing something. There'd be other ways we'd be obligated besides that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think so too.
I didn't want to kind of leave the idea that I was thinking that only.
I didn't think that at all. I thought you were really clear. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you might want to cover later our obligation to give. Let's say the elders here decided to start sending money to the orphans home. What would be our individual obligation? We'll talk about that.
I think I plan to. Sure, that's a good, I'll address that specifically. That's a good thought. Any other, was that the second bell? I can't. It's time. Well, anyway, appreciate y'all's good. And if you have any questions, thoughts, appreciate them very much. Good discussion this morning, I thought, helpful in a lot of ways.